Welcome, friends, old and new, those who are joining us for this series, Ideas, Illusions, and Ideals. We're going to continue today with a very brief review of what we covered last week, and then move on into the second cause of illusion. So we started with this whole notion of the problem ideas that DK described, decades ago, but still seems to be the situation that we find ourselves in today. And he does tell us and repeats it in many different ways, but essentially by expressing to humanity the teaching that he's imparting to us, by bringing it into the minds of the public, and by living a life conforming with the teaching, our service is very real. So let us pause as he instructs us for a silent Om that resonates from the highest point in the head center. And now the Om to be heard right at the center of the group, proclaiming God is all. Visualizing our group, those who are with us today and those who will join us subjectively, and any who join us by listening and viewing the recording. We see the light as we hear the Om sounded at the center of the group. And we sound the mantra of the new group of world servers. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech. Consider this kind of a spiral where we turn back and bring in, again on a higher level, what we covered in the past together. We recognize the fact that consciousness on a plane is not yet to have control on that plane. These are two very different conditions. We recognize, in fact, that we, as members of humanity, are in reality the brain of the planetary deity, one of the many units, which he says is like the brain cell in the human apparatus. And we recognize our place as the planetary throat center, becoming, as the new group of world servers, the planetary Ajna center. We recognize that living life is for all progression. Progression in the realm of consciousness, in naturally graded awakenings. and that this will continue through the middle of the next round, the 5th round. And in this principle of becoming aware, we become aware of our point of identification. Progressing to the point to eventually be identified as soul. And as we progress, and as the consciousness is awakened to reality, the nature of the great illusion will become apparent. And this impacts all that we think we know and think we understand about astrology. And the reminder that we do need to open to the new astrology. But we are limited, for consciousness, we're told, is dependent upon its vehicle for expression. And thus we're involved in this process together to study and reflect on the teachings. Consciousness is dependent upon life and energy for existence. So we gather the life center, the heart, and the energy of the soul merging into each individual, and then joining that together to move upward together on the spiral. Each aware of our aura, our sphere of radiation, the impression that we leave, and to continuously improve with the sense of clairvoyance, developing that so that we have the correct effect upon people in community and in our environment. For this vital living aura is the recording agent of all impressions, both objective and subjective. It is for each of us the agent of sensitive response, which the indwelling self must control and use in order to register impressions. And to remember it's not primarily our words which produce reactions, even though those words are supposed to embody our reactions and our thinking, but those are usually expressions of emotional desires. So let us lift up to the higher levels and work from the mental level, so that as the emotional reactions lessen and as the mental apparatus clarifies, the progress that we make will be noted. And that we will be able to distinguish quite readily and carefully between the astral and mental bodies and that which is emanating, and use the aura, which is essentially radiatory. And as we merge the three bodies, that light is clearer, more purified, and more aligned. And remember that no sound is ever made without producing a corresponding response in Deva substance and driving multitudes of tiny lives to take specific forms. So we sound the Om to purify the centers. We sound the Om to drive the lesser lives out and to allow the higher Devic forms to take precedence for the helping of humanity on the physical plane and to better express the inner purpose and state of mind and build our forms of the Deva substance of the solar angel. And when we eventually achieve initiate status, self-interest is declining now until it will disappear and only God is left. Only that which is the beauty, the goodness, and the truth, the quality. So think back, what soul quality, as we've worked together, as we've moved together in the dissipation of glamour and this effort to understand the dispelling of illusion, what soul quality did you choose to embody for this group? And see that soul quality using etheric sight, carrying that quality to the point of clairvoyance, bringing the astral field, the purified field, the purifying energies into that field through spiritual discernment, beaming down from the causal body to guide. As DK says, we must not forget that it is largely a question of matter and vibration, unifying the bodies that we have built to the point that the personality as a conscious whole recognizes and obeys the higher self. Exposing the spell of illusion and allowing us to move to the higher points and eventually to the Buddhic plane, knowing that we must develop a sense of taste for the right thought, right speech, the highest expression, and use the listening imagination to hear the sound of the soul and the Om to purify the physical body and subdue the emotional body. So that we can eventually respond to the group vibration coming from the soul, aligned with the ashram. We must command or bring the lower bodies of Devic substance, the elementals, under the control of the higher. We use the stage of mental recording, the stage of brain reception, and the stage of recognized interpretation. For our character in its entirety is involved, as DK says, in this important matter of correct interpretation. We bring this into alignment automatically, the aura and the needed condition by right living, high thinking, and loving activity. And we focus on the virtues that we are to embody. So, in scanning the virtues, identify one that comes to the fore for you today. What is needed that will build into the subjective consciousness of our group? For those who will be viewing this in the recording, you may want to pause the recording and ponder on the virtues. What pops out, what comes forth as the virtue you embody for your family, for your community, for your exoteric work life, for your esoteric group life in service. That may be a virtue of the ashram to which you are or will be affiliated. You may want to jot it down, and you may want to share it with the group at another time. So these ideas come from the intuition levels only when there is developed soul contact, a potent mind control. Consider that. A trained intelligence, a purified emotional body, and of course, the good glandular equipment that allows for the result of the above requirements. And the ability to receive the psychic gift waves. Each life tends to greater stability, and the emotional body is stabilized and becomes a pure reflector, and the mental body serves the purpose of a sensitive plate and discriminator, and the intelligent explainer of the higher imparted truth. So we are freeing ourselves of the illusion that our ideas and impressions are our own. They come from the higher soul level. And we are free of illusion when we are on the plane of intuition. So we quiet the thought-making propensity of the mind. Aika, would you read the section highlighted?
The vibrations of the abstract levels can then begin to be felt. You need to remember that they come via the causal body, the vehicle of the higher self, and the average causal body is on the third subplane of the mental plane. This is a point not sufficiently recognized. Ponder on it. Real abstract thought becomes possible only when the personality has by vibration reciprocal to that of the ego aligned itself sufficiently to form a fairly unimpeded channel.
And this channel is, in fact, called the Antakarana. So we visualize the Antakarana. We animate the causal body, the soul vehicle, the petals and the vortices, seen as in motion. We study the effects and use the listening imagination. And through this process, the flashes and brief awareness of the higher ideals, vision, and healing do come from the Buddhic plane and are recorded in the mind of the initiate. Martine, would you read the highlighted section, please?
Aspirants and disciples represent those brain cells which are beginning to fall into the larger divine rhythm. They are learning the nature of responsiveness. The achieving of that focused attention and mental quiet, wherein reality can be contacted, true and the beautiful can be registered, divine purpose can be recorded, and it becomes possible to transmit to the phenomenal form upon the physical plane the needed energy whereby the subjective realization can be materialized.
Let's note from the Agni Yoga series, Hierarchy, Sloka 119. Thought controls the vital impulse. Consciousness attracts all vital expressions, and the creator of thought saturates space. Therefore, it is so imperative to strive to broad thoughts and to the understanding of the foundations of life. Each life is built upon its own orbit, and each life has a foundation upon which all actions must correspond to the highest. Hence, each thought must be directed to true achievement and must guard the highest striving. The quality of striving depends upon the impulse. Therefore, one should develop all thoughts leading to the refinement of consciousness. Thus, one can build a higher step. Let's pause. Heike, you had shared something related to tiredness.
Yes, okay. So I'm becoming aware that my thoughts are driving somewhere which is not in alignment. When I get tired or when I feel heavy, and it doesn't matter in which situation, if it's at work or at home doing something, I feel the heaviness, and this heaviness makes me aware of looking what was I thinking at that moment, and to turn around my thoughts and do conscious thought forms, send conscious thoughts out into whatever the environment, people, or the situation. So it's tiredness which makes me aware, or heaviness.
Thank you. Ben.
Well, the brain just makes thoughts 24 hours a day. I can look at one and say, this one is not mine. I am not my thoughts. And the soul says that. And then I know how to do reframing of thoughts that hang around past that point, and raise them up and turn them into something that's useful.
Thank you. So let's know this idea that we're reading. Thought controls the vital impulse. Martine, will you read this from DK for us?
Abstract thoughts are merely the broad, general, and universal perceptions and world inclusions which the gradually developing intelligence of mankind has registered and recognized, and which the foremost thinkers of the race grasped with facility, which seems so amazing to the neophytes.
You pause and just think back to when you were maybe first starting into the teachings, or at a time when you were in a particular environment where you were learning so much, where a broad, general, universal perception dawned into your consciousness. And what that response was from your being, of being sort of lifted up. And then potentially at a later time in work or in a community situation where that great, broad, general idea and perception was being characterized on a very concrete level in relation to something that you either agree with, or that maybe you didn't agree with the way it was being concretized. And maybe can you remember what that feeling was which was definitely, I imagine, an astral emotional response to becoming or coming into the emotional idealism of the astral field that then colored that idea, put a veil on that great general universal perception that you had experienced at an earlier point. It's one of the ways to kind of investigate for yourself this reflection on a seed thought. And DK gives these in many of them in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, as contemplative processes where he asks questions in relation to one of these ideas like freedom or joy or beauty, and how that has been colored and veiled in your mind. So knowledge which the ordinary man can possess, which perhaps is best expressed as theoretical, gives us an understanding of ways and means and methods. And by acting upon this knowledge and by conforming to the requirements of the intended investigation or development, we become aware of the light in the head. So the practice of using the creative imagination to see and sense around one of these divine higher ideas, the cohesion and the constant motion of the vortices of the causal body. And Dwayne Carpenter is using animation, but to be able to develop and practice this constant motion emerging from the point as these ideas move and expand out into the causal body. And you can use any one of a number of techniques. If you want to develop a particular vortex of the causal body around knowledge, knowledge love, or knowledge sacrifice, you can use your own creative imagination to create the animation and bring that into the light in the head. And then use your discriminative knowledge, having contacted that light and used it. The pairs of opposites become apparent then more, and the duality becomes known, and the choice is apparent using discrimination. By the addition of dispassion or non-attachment to the discriminative knowledge, that is how the hindrances are worn away, and the veils which hide the light become increasingly thin until eventually the third or highest light is touched. And that is the light of the intuition that brings about the illuminative knowledge. Overcoming the pairs of opposites as a forerunner to complete illumination and the full light of day, which occurs at the fourth initiation. So you can use colors, and yet colors are in and of themselves veils. So you may want to visualize the color actually disappearing as the light emerges. Heike, would you read the highlighted section of this teaching that we have covered before?
These flashes of intuition are at first simply vivid flashes of illumination, breaking forth into the mind consciousness and disappearing almost instantaneously. But they come with increasing frequency as the habit of meditation is cultivated and persist for increasingly long periods as stability of the mind is achieved. Gradually the light shines forth in a continuous stream until the aspirant walks in the full light of day. When the intuition begins to function, the aspirant has to learn to utilize it by turning the light which is in him upon all matters, obscure, subtle, and remote, and thus enlarging his horizon, solving his problems, and increasing his efficiency. What he sees and contacts through the use of his spiritual light has then to be registered, understood, and adapted for use by the man upon the physical plane through the medium of the brain.
And through the medium of the brain, we develop the thought forms of solution. So this whole process that we're going through is to utilize a process that we can share with others and utilize in group formation. And we start with this thought form vitalization, as we're told in Cosmic Fire. This energy is directed from one or other of the three higher centers according to the quality of the embodied idea. So having at least three, having the triad, or using the triangle formation is quite effective and efficient, because you're going to use these three higher centers as we do when we use the superimposed triangles. And the thought form will be seen pouring towards the rapidly objectivizing idea from the particular center involved. And this is a way for us, when we use the superimposed triangles, to visualize right human relations in the full light of day. So let us, as we continue together, to pause at the beginning of each of our times together, to visualize, using the superimposed triangles, right human relations in the full light of day, which is the light of Scorpio, or the disciple, through all the tests and trials. Martine, will you sound the mantra as we stand together today with that intention?
We are points of light within a greater light. We are strands of loving energy within the stream of love divine. We are points of sacrificial fire, focus within the fire wheel of God. And thus we stand. We are a way by which humanity may achieve. We are a source of strength, enabling them to stand. We are beams of light, shining upon their way, and thus we stand. And standing thus, revolve, and tread this way the ways of all of humanity, and knows the ways of God, and thus stand.
So as we move forward together, let's use a technique that Martine shared. That when there's a difference in the energy and the vibration of the thoughts that comes from our lower mind, observe the thought. Go to the point of the observer. And then reframing to what would have been a higher thought, a thought that would come from the higher mind. Observe that duality. And then practice letting that higher thought drop in to consciousness. It's particularly valuable when one is in group and we are working on the glamour of judgment and criticism, because those thoughts are often veiled with a previous experience. So as we move forward together, let us practice that and make, as Ben says, the choice and practice in our groups. So we had previously reviewed the illusions that are caused through wrong perception of an idea. And we learned that the disciple cannot distinguish then between an idea and an ideal, between an idea and a thought form, or between an intuitive and a mental concept. So using the techniques that have been shared today, we have ways in which we can work on these illusions that are caused by the wrong perception of an idea. So let's look more carefully at the second cause, the way of wrong interpretation. Heike, would you read this for us, please?
The idea of a vital entity or a germ of living potency is seen through the medium of partial view, distorted through the inadequacy of the mental equipment, and frequently stepped down into futility. The mechanism for right understanding is lacking, and though the man may be given his highest and his best, and though he may be able in some measure to hold his mind steady in the light, yet what he is offering to the idea is but a poor thing at the best. This leads to illusion through misinterpretation. The cause is an overestimation of one's mental powers. The sin par excellence of the mental type is pride, and that colors all activities in the early stages. The cure is the development of a cautious spirit.
So one idea for us is to, in our group glamour work, to work on aspects of this glamour of pride in one's achievements, really, what we've been able to achieve in our studies, what we've been able to achieve in our lives that are still but a partial view and that can be distorted in our daily lives because of the inadequacy of our current mental equipment. And what do we then have to do to create for ourselves an education of our mind to the higher, rather than stepping down those ideas over and over again into futility? And where may we have been guilty of that? Guilty, that's, yeah, certainly a loaded word. But when we have overused a technique or overused an idea, even in group work or in our own service, where we are really operating under an illusion that that idea is going to be helpful across the broad range of folks that we deal with and the broad range of groups with which we have experience. And all that experience is part of our soul path. So using this feedback that we're being given here today from DK to really do a self-examination. And ponder on that. DK has told us over and over the aligning of the three vehicles is what is required so that the mental body is in direct communication, unobstructed and free from interference, straight through to the physical brain. And with that, as we read before, the great thinkers of the race, the true exponents of lower mind, are fundamentally those whose three lower bodies are aligned. And that is to say, those whose mental body holds the other two in circumspect alignment. So this constant check on the self. And how do we then move that to the level of group work? And be able to move not only as the individual, but the group to the expression of that using the four lesser brain centers: the solar plexus in the head, the splenic center in the head, sacral center in the head, and the base center in the head, so that they then are functioning at a high vibration. And how can we continuously work to the point that that is automatically what occurs in group formation? Go through some of these rather rapidly because we've been through them before, and always keeping in mind that it isn't what we think. It is not in ordered sections. It proceeds as the greater system proceeds, with constant overlapping parallelism due to the inherent ray of the spirit or monad to cyclic changes. And because most of us are not even aware, most people that we deal with are not even aware of that monadic ray, we will encounter points where we're studying the science of the relations and in our dissipation of glamour work and dispelling illusion, where in group work, it will be apparent that there is a different monadic ray at play for our group members. We may believe that we're all on the same soul ray, but because we do not know the monadic ray, this can be an awakening for us. These diversity of forces that are playing forth, not only astrologically, but from unknown cosmic centers. And you're probably, in your own experience, you've been aware of when this will pop up into your awareness in a group process. And this we've read before, but also to keep in mind that it's this abstract mind is brought into conscious functioning through the building of the Antakarana, the Rainbow Bridge, uniting the illumined personality, focused in the mind-body motivated by the love of the soul, with the monad or with the one life, and thus enabling the divine manifesting Son of God to express the significance of the words, God is love and God is a consuming fire, so that we are then able, using this stream, to activate those previously named centers, the 4 lesser brain centers, onto the astral plane. It is the goal, and it is taking much practice, much study, and life experience. And that is that which dispels illusion, and it substitutes it for a true spiritual and infallible perception that we can achieve with true contemplation. And he does tell us, as we've read before, that we are not at that level yet. We are not initiate. We have not passed most of us have not passed the first major initiation, the third. But that is what is on the path for us. And there is no need for discouragement, for it is a science. And we will have these moments of intense illumination when the intuition will suddenly reveal, and when the capacity to think abstractly and synthetically will pour floods of light upon the most difficult and complex of problems, the hope for humanity.
There is, however,
And this is just another reminder slide relating us to the science of the Antakarana. We have gone through this before in relation to the occult meditations that we have practiced together. And it is one that we want to keep in mind, because we will, through group service, be practicing the occult meditations, so that we will be able to impact our mental energy and create plans and ideas that will not be competitive, but will embody the idea of brotherhood and will lift the lower to the higher. And as he tells us, this is so new and relatively so rare that he developed the seed groups in their embryonic stage, and we are still in that embryonic stage for the most part. And he says to us that it'll be apparent to us, therefore, why it's necessary for the initial or first groups to lay the emphasis upon telepathic rapport. Because upon that rapport, understandingly cultivated and developed, the success of these seed groups will depend. And it doesn't mean that our success depends upon the established success of the first group, but upon the comprehension by all the groups of the meaning and purpose and techniques of telepathy. So those of us who are aligned with the seed group, we work with many groups and are developing this telepathic rapport that will be a hallmark of the new group of world servers. And we know that first we'll vitalize when we are truly a unified advanced group. We will vitalize through the splenic center in the head, the group physical body, through group service. And secondly, will bring about the development of self-consciousness in the group itself through the solar plexus and heart centers merged with meditations 1 and 2, and that we will then transmit spiritual energy and sweep the entire group into a state of spiritual being using the ajna and throat centers. So this is the goal, that we will be able to stand as a group in the head's clear light, for it's only then that we are allowed to picture personal sensitivities and personal thought, and then only as a temporary limitation for the group. So as we move into the age of Aquarius, these ideas are so important for us to keep within us in all group activities, family, community, work, higher service groups, study groups, so that we can turn that into the highest alignment with our ashramic groups. So we seek brain-mind alignment with the soul, and we see the love of the soul pouring into the personality, transmuting its force and working through onto the physical plane, expressed as personality love, actuated and directed by soul love. These are DK's words. And we use occult meditation, a seed thought. We also use the formulas that were given for the dissipation of glamour. And we seek to align brain and mind, visualizing the soul light pouring into the head center, the heart in the head, and the solar plexus, splenic centers, sacral and base centers in the head center. Visualizing this so that we can direct then the light onto the astral plane. And more effectively, every time we use the formula, the technique of light, we dissipate the glamours. Individual, group, and prepare in the coming year to focus on a world glamour. So we organize in a steady, united effort. DK says this must take the form of a closer cooperation between all groups and a standing together in a closer relationship, thus strengthening each other's hands and, where possible, pooling resources. It should result also in a united push forward of all spiritual and occult agencies and the carrying of the truth along all possible lines down among the masses of men. Martine.
Embodying tolerance and patience, let us ponder for a few minutes the spiritual significance of the following 4 words: stability, serenity, strength, service. Build them into your very nature, thus aiding the world of closing the solar plexus and transmuting its force.
As DK tells us, the dangers of meditation are largely the dangers of our virtue, and therein lies much of the difficulty. They are largely the dangers of a fine mental concept that runs ahead of the capacity of the lower vehicles, especially of the dense physical. And we know from our work with esoteric healing that what occurs then is disease. Aspiration, concentration, and determination are necessary virtues. But if used without discrimination and without a sense of time in evolution, they may lead to a shattering of the physical vehicle that will delay all progress for some particular life. So we're called on to have what he calls a virile common sense, coupled with a happy sense of proportion that leads to due caution and an approximation of the necessary method to the immediate need. And we always work within the higher alignment. And a sensitivity to 7 groups of ideas and their resultant ideals. To the members of the hierarchy, the idea and its effects are not only interpreted in terms of human thought forms and human idealism. These ideas and their effects are contacted and studied in their relation to the mind of God Himself and to the planetary kingdoms. And these ideas come from and emanate from the Buddhic plane. Thus, we have our path and we have our goal to be able to touch the Buddhic plane. So we're going to close with DK's instructions on the importance of occult meditation, just reading these through today. And then as we move forward together, particularly as we begin more on the 5th essential relation and our in-depth study of these causes of illusion, we'll try to practice occult meditation in its different formats as we move forward, using seed thoughts and occult meditation without seed thought. Martine, would you read this first slide, please?
The importance of occult meditation. Meditation should have the effect of bringing all 3 bodies more completely under the control of the ego and lead to a coordination and an alignment, to a rounding out and a symmetrical development that will make a man of real use to the great ones.
Heike,
From meditation, record the following. 1. Any spiritual experience which may come to you, such as contact with some presence, either of your own soul or angel of the presence, contact with some disciple, and eventually, when your life and work and discipline warranted, contact with one of the masters. Record this in an impartial way, preserving the scientific attitude and seeking ever a practical explanation before accepting a mystical one. The spirit of agnosticism, not of atheism, is of real value to the beginner and preserves him from the snares of the world illusion and of lower psychism.
Record any illumination which may come to you, throwing a flood of light upon a problem and revealing the way that you or the group should go. Any intuition which, corroborated by the reason, carries one forward into knowledge and evokes the wisdom of the soul and its registration by the brain via the mind. Ben.
Any telepathic happenings between you and your fellow disciples. This telepathic interplay should be cultivated, but it must be most carefully checked and counter-checked and the strictest accuracy preserved. Thus we shall have the fostering of the spirit of truth, which is the governing principle of all true telepathic communication. An ashram functions telepathically when fully and rightly organized.
Martine.
Any phenomena of a mystical and spiritual kind should also be noted. The seeing of the light in the head comes under this category. Its brilliance should be noted, its growth, and dimming the hearing of the voice of the silence, which is the voice of the soul, but not of the subconscious, the registering of messages from the soul, or from other disciples and world servers. Expansion of consciousness, which initiates you into the conscious life of God, as it manifests through any forms, and the hearing of the note of all beings. A close study of the third part of the light of the soul, called the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, will indicate the type of phenomena which would find its place in this diary.
Heike.
How can I, in my small sphere, be of service to the world? Let me, says Master DK, reply to these questions by pointing out that by thinking this teaching into the minds of the public, by expressing before your fellow men the teaching it imparts, and by a life lived in conforming with its teaching, your service is very real.
And it's probably apparent to us, having studied the effects, as DK says, of our progress in the science of relations and in this study of the blue books, that is a rather integrated study, bringing them together in a different way and focusing on the dispelling of illusion and the dissipation of glamour, the glamour of criticism and judgment, of blame, and now beginning to dissipate pride and spiritual ambition. We'll be in a position as a group to begin to utilize those 4 steps and points of mindful contemplation that DK gives us. So thank you so much for the way in which we're carefully beginning to follow DK's suggestions to know thyself, which I would say in group work, we must know our group and our groups, to study the effects and proceed slowly and with caution. If you'd like a copy of the slides, you can email info@shapingfutures@gmail.com, or put a note in the YouTube recording, and they will, with your email address, and they'll be sent to you.